New Phyrexia is on the rise, and our return to this diseased world is on the horizon for Magic the Gathering. One of the major plot points for this story is that the Phyrexians have perfected the process of completing planeswalkers to serve as their minions. We all remember the stunning revelation of Tamiyo being Phyrexianized, and the ominous words of the praetor Jin-Gitaxias that she wouldn't be the last. As we prepare to say goodbye to some of our favorite planeswalkers destined to fall under the will of Elesh Norn and New Phyrexia, we ask the question, is there any hope for planeswalkers like Tamiyo? Is there anything out there in the multiverse capable of curing the disease known as Phyresis that leads to completion? Today we examine cases and characters in the MTG lore who have suffered from Phyresis and beaten it. These are the inspiring cases of those who beat the Phyrexians' completion process, all in the hopes that one day we can bring Tamiyo back. Remember, if you enjoy our content here at the Aether Hub, please support the channel by leaving this video a like and becoming a subscriber. And now, let's get back to the lore. Tezzeret is indeed immune to the effects of Phyresis thanks to his master, the dragon planeswalker Bolas. We aren't totally sure to what extent Bolas was concerned with the rising new Phyrexian threat on the plane of Mirrodin, but the dragon was at least interested enough to try and learn more. Bolas is a very keen strategist. When he makes a plan, he tries to account for every possible variable. As we know, his ultimate goal was to become a god with immense power and reign that power over the entire multiverse. To that end, Bolas regularly assessed other multiversal threats that could one day challenge his supremacy. We saw this philosophy when he essentially orchestrated the formation of the Gatewatch just to test how a joint effort by other planeswalkers could possibly impede his plans. But this was also seen in his releasing of the Eldrazi Titans that had laid dormant on the plane of Zendikar. In manipulating others to release the Titans, these beings from the blind eternities that feast on planes, Bolas again wanted to examine the Eldrazi's potential impact on his rise to power. After observing the Gatewatch defeat the Titans, they were written off as a non-threat. This brings us back to Bolas's interest in New Phyrexia. Just like the Gatewatch and the Eldrazi Titans, Bolas wanted to ensure that the spreading influence of the Phyrexians wouldn't be a roadblock to his end goal. From studying the rise of Yawgmoth and the Phyrexians' first series of invasions, most importantly to the plane of Dominaria, he determined that they certainly were major players on the multiversal board that he had to account for, even if these new Phyrexians were quite different from their original designs. If their disease found a new leader, like Yawgmoth, to rally around and guide them, then some of his multiverse may fall to Phyrexia, which Bolas doesn't very much care for. So he sent one of his minions to monitor and disrupt the growing hierarchy of New Phyrexia, that minion of course being Tezzeret. We have no clue how Bolas came across this antidote, this vaccine to prevent Phyresis, but obviously extensive research was done on Phyrexianized monsters in order to discover this preventative. We shouldn't first ever discount how smart Bolas is. He's really smart, so coming up with this formula, given time, was probably a walk in the park for the dragon. Giving this serum to Tezzeret, it ensured his minion wouldn't be completed and totally absorbed into Phyrexian society, meaning that he would remain loyal to Bolas and stay on mission. And that mission? To infiltrate the Phyrexian hierarchy, report on their development, and try to prevent a clear leader from taking hold. Of course, Tezzeret being Tezzeret failed utterly in this and, as we now know, has essentially joined ranks with the Phyrexians. But because of that injection, he cannot be totally completed. We don't know if this merely prevents the normal process of glistening oil corruption or the more extensive surgical conversion now being implemented by Jin-Gitaxias, but it's still a fair bet to say that Tezzeret has the secret to preventing and maybe even reversing Phyresis coursing through his veins. This also means we have the mind who came up with this vaccine sitting powerless behind figurative bars. Bolas himself, after the failed War of the Spark, could return to the story by providing the multiverse with his life-saving formula, though the dragon may only relinquish it for something in return. Perhaps his freedom? And to all of you fan theorists out there thinking that maybe Bolas could be completed, I get this a lot, so let me just say this real quick. He gave the vaccine to his lowly minion. Do you really think he didn't use it on himself as well just in case the Phyrexians possibly reached him? So I'm gonna say that fan theory is probably busted right out the gate because he probably too gave himself the vaccine to protect himself against Phyresis. Probably one of the most influential characters in the history of Mirrodin and the rising new Phyrexian threat, it's one that a lot of modern players may not even be familiar with. But undoubtedly, Melira stands as Magic the Gathering's single greatest hope in reversing the completion of Planeswalkers. Melira is a character introduced during the Quest for Karn storyline that includes the Mirrodin cycles. She's a human born on Mirrodin in its dense mechanical jungle region known as the Tangle. At this point in Mirrodin's history, all of its biological inhabitants have evolved with some element of inorganic grafting. Because the plane they live on was essentially comprised completely of metal, it makes sense that over generations, the life forms there would adapt to this environment, and that adaptation usually showed in metal studs, growths, or platings that covered and joined with the organism's skin. This was true for Melira's people as well, a group known as the Silvox, who called the Tangle their home. However, Melira was an abnormality on Mirrodin, referred to as a fleshling, which was super rare on the plane. She was born with no such metal growths, and was seen as a terrible omen by her people. At birth, her parents and community exiled the baby to the wilds, where she would surely die if not for the compassion of a troll named Thrun, who raised the young fleshling to adulthood, understanding that her condition was meant for a higher purpose. It's not that Melira was simply 100% organic that made her special. The conditions of her birth also made her immune to Phyresis. She could not be corrupted by Phyrexia. While the others around her, all with varying amounts of inorganic material on them, succumbed to the whispers of the Praetors, Melira stood strong and independent. She was indeed special, but she could also share her gift with others, having the uncanny ability to cleanse the bodies of those afflicted by Phyresis. It was this ability to cure the completed that caught the attention of the Phyrexians. They wanted to understand her immunity so that they could formulate an even stronger variant, leading to incurable completions. They captured the young human and conducted painful experiments on her. It's not known how much they got out of their research, but Melira was eventually rescued by Koth, Venser, and Elspeth, and went on to be a lead figure in the Mirran resistance against New Phyrexia. Melira now stands as a symbol of what Mirrodin once was, and the future hope that the corruption of New Phyrexia could one day be cleansed from the plane. Through studying her powers, we could possibly unlock the secrets to reversing the completion of our Planeswalkers. But there is a pretty big caveat. Melira's powers only work on those whose bodies have been infected with Phyresis, not their hearts. In other words, if the heart is completed, there is no going back. It's sad to say, but Melira alone may not be enough to free the likes of Tamiyo, who clearly is totally completed. But it's still a window we can explore to possibly stop this fate from befalling other ally Planeswalkers. As we just discussed someone who can cure Phyresis, let's also take a look at a patient who has been cured of the affliction. The artificial planeswalker Karn had caught the disease the old-fashioned way, stepping in some glistening oil and letting it progress almost to completion. With his mind and will being compromised by the Phyrexians, Karn sat on a giant throne in the middle of the new Phyrexian society, ready to become their new father of machines, a station not filled since the death of Yawgmoth himself. It was crucial for the fight of Mirrodin to free Karn from this fate, which transpired through the Quest for Karn storyline. It was Melira, in fact, who aided in Karn's cleansing, using her ability to purge the Phyresis from the golem's body, but also noting that his heart was already too far gone. Her powers could not pierce the Phyrexian influence that took hold, and it looked as if Karn was lost for good. This may be the closest comparison we have to the completion of a planeswalker like Tamiyo, someone who had been 100% completed, as cited by Melira's own admission. But as we know, Karn was spared this fate and ultimately cured. While Melira was able to cleanse Karn's body, his heart required a more aggressive treatment. The planeswalker Venser, an old ally of Karn's, had joined their party on their mission, but over the course of their adventure, he too was infected by Phyresis. He didn't let anyone know as the disease progressed and was nearing the point of his body failing on him. What he did next could be the true cure for completed planeswalkers. In order to free Karn's heart from the Phyrexian stranglehold, Venser offered up his own life, his mana, and his spark to essentially cleanse Karn's soul. We don't get a lot of information regarding this act or the spell he used to enact this sacrifice, but one way or another, Venser somehow transplanted his Planeswalker spark into Karn, freeing him from Phyrexia and showing us that yes, it is possible to cure a Planeswalker even after they've been totally Phyrexianized. But at the same time, the price you pay is extremely high. It essentially amounts to trading a life for a life, which honestly puts us in the same boat as before. Either way, a Planeswalker could be lost even if the other is cured. As Karn now stands as a central figure in our return to New Phyrexia and the fight to free Mirrodin, his personal experience with Phyrexia and the completion process will be invaluable if we are to cure Planeswalkers like Tamiyo and others who fall to this disease. Perhaps Karn can research and study this condition, find a way to cleanse the heart and soul of someone infected without costing another life to do it. Either way, Karn could help provide a cure to those under total Phyrexian control like Tamiyo. So we have several examples in the MTG lore of those who have either prevented Phyrexia or completely reversed it. Now, with modern New Phyrexian lore, the process Planeswalkers like Tamiyo undergo is quite extensive, and obviously much more involved than simply being infected with Phyrexia through stepping into a pile of glistening oil. It may be a long shot, but at least we know there is the possibility of a cure out there in the multiverse, and maybe, just maybe, one of them could be used to save Tamiyo and others who will undoubtedly fall to the machinations of New Phyrexia. Now though, I turn to you. I want to know your thoughts on the Phyrexians completion process and if you believe there is a cure for it. Let me know in the comment section below. Remember, if you enjoyed this video guys, don't forget to support the Aether Hub by leaving it a like, hitting the subscribe button, and taking the notification bell. It all goes a long way in helping the channel grow. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!